Welcome to the Bells I Hear podcast. We will speak with experts who will debunk the myths and misconceptions surrounding homelessness and highlight the innovative approaches for addressing the issues, causes, and consequences of housing insecurity. I'm Elisa Smith, your host, a mentor, professor of legal studies, and former public defender. Thanks for tuning in to the Bells I Hear. Today on The Bells I Hear, we're continuing our series exploring the intersections of law and homelessness. In this episode, we're diving into how AI is reshaping access to justice. To help us understand the connections between AI and the law, the risks of AI, and its potential benefits for transforming the legal system to be more equitable, we're joined by Sateesh Nori. He is a research fellow at NYU Center on Civil Justice, and he is the Chief Legal Futurist at LawDroid. Thank you for joining us today, Sateesh.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you. So, Sateesh, you started your career as a legal aid lawyer representing people facing housing insecurity, housing threats, civil justice challenges. And today your work focuses on shaping how legal services are operationalized, the future of legal services in ways that supports access to justice. Can you share with us what inspires you to do this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wanted to help people, and I found that being a lawyer who helps people is a really great calling. It's something that we all read about. We read To Kill a Mockingbird. We want to be Atticus Finch, or we read Bryan Stevenson's Just Mercy, or we watch Law and Order, right?
Yeah.
We root for the underdog. And that's a really noble profession, right? That's what the law is supposed to be. So I entered legal services about 22 years ago, and I thought it would be this wonderful, fruitful, meaningful work. And it was. But the underbelly of the work is that we will never be able to help everyone who needs our help. And Legal Services Corporation, the federal body itself, has recognized that 92% of the problems faced by low income Americans are never going to be addressed. There will never be enough lawyers, there's never enough resources, there isn't enough time in the day to help people with their day to day life problems. Things like bankruptcy, domestic violence, immigration issues, employment issues, evictions, foreclosures. People don't get a fair chance because they don't have access to the law. And that's just wrong. And so that's what led me into this exploration of, well, how do we do better? And around that same time, the pandemic hit, and we all had some time to think and pause and reevaluate our careers and our choices.
Yeah.
And AI also started to kind of come out. And so those two things, presented me luckily with this chance to learn about how we can do better.
Yeah. And
And what AI, yeah,
your work is in the civil spaces, right? Your work is
yeah,
focused
absolutely.
on,
Yeah.
and it's focused on how AI can help support these individuals. This is not a criminal right to counsel issue. This is the civil justice component where
Absolutely.
individuals
Yeah.
operate unrepresented quite often.
Yeah, it's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that, they all hear the Miranda rights, when they watch crime shows on TV, you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one, one will be appointed for you. But what most people don't realize is, well, if you're sued for a debt, or if you're facing eviction, or you owe money to a bank on your home, or you're in family court and you want to get a divorce. Well, you're not going to get a lawyer for free. And lawyers cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And to imagine how much money you'd have to earn to be able to pay somebody 15 or $20,000 at once to represent you in a civil matter that will really change your life.
Right.
It could really impact your life, your family in meaningful ways.
Right.
That's really surprising to a lot of people, and
Oh,
that's the truth.
yeah. And And there are legal, I mean, you worked in legal aid
Mhm.
around these spaces, and there are legal aid services. But at least in my experience, I've talked to people who said, there's a long wait list, or they have
Mhm.
to pick and choose among their
Mhm.
issues to say, well, I guess I'll address my divorce, but not these debts I owe,
Mhm.
because the system is overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it in context. The entire budget for all 50 states for legal services is 560 million, give or take. That's it. So that's not enough money to pay for lawyers for even, a tenth of the people who need that kind of help. And in some states like New York, they have local funding and foundations and law firms may support these efforts. But in many other states, there's no funding.
Right.
And so people are on their own
Yeah.
and they're
And then,
left looking for their own answers.
right. And then of course there's that inequity of across states, that some people might have resources and
Mhm.
others don't. And so I saw another interview that you did where you mentioned that your work is hoping to make legal aid obsolete, refocusing the legal system on people and not lawyers. Can you tell me a little bit of how that might happen, why it's important, and why legal aid lawyers shouldn't be afraid?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not seriously saying that we should all quit our jobs and do something else. But if we think about the founding of our great country, it's the greatest democracy in the world, in the history of the world. It's also the richest country in the history of the world. And yet we have such deep rooted problems, even though we have laws and benefits and protections in place. And the only reason that lawyers like me exist is because of this gap of what's on the books and how people can access that information and that help. And so, in an ideal world, I wouldn't exist. My job wouldn't exist because the system would just work properly. And so, our goal as legal services lawyers and nonprofit lawyers should be to make ourselves obsolete, right? People shouldn't have to go to court to fight for the same things that everybody else gets and takes for granted.
Right.
And that's what's happening to middle class folks, low income people. And it's reflected in our politics, right? People just don't trust our government. They don't trust our institutions. They don't believe elections are real. They don't believe the courts are really doing their jobs. And all of this is because they don't have access. They don't have a seat at the table. They don't have a ticket to play.
Yeah.
And so we should be working to make that, the reality instead of permanently being in this state of crisis and triage and emergency work that lawyers like me do all the time.
And how do you think AI is positioned to advance those access to justice issues for this 92% of people who don't have access to a lawyer?
Great question. It's something that I think about all the time. And some might say, well, it's just another panacea, right? You're just throwing another new tech idea, something that's really big in the news, and we're going to try to use it to solve all problems, large and small. And there is some truth to that. There is a lot of hype around AI, and we're thinking about it for healthcare and exploring space and predicting the weather and curing cancer and so on. And so, what's really happening? Well, let's put it really simply. AI is a type of like mathematical model that uses rules and applies those rules to patterns and patterns of facts. And that's exactly what the law is, right? You take
Right.
a rule that's on the books. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And then you have a set of facts. Well, this is what happened in real life. How do those facts fit within that set of rules? And so for legal work and legal analysis, AI is tailor made. It's perfect. It's exactly right. And if you think about like how AI has been trained, it's been trained on games like chess and Go, right? And so these kind of if then kind of situations are exactly what we talk about in law school, right? In court. And so there's no better tool to help
Mhm.
kind of de complicate or uncomplicate legal rules and legalese into everyday situations.
So let me follow up on that a little bit. Um, can AI keep up? I mean, the law changes every day. A court
Mhm.
decision can be rendered while we're having this conversation and change the law. So can AI keep up in real time? And can it really reduce legal ease and make things simplified for people? Because that is, in my other life, that is one of the things I look at in terms of language in the law and its
Mhm.
inaccessibility because of how complex it is.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And it's something that comes up in this thing called hallucinations, right? People
Right.
talk about, well, it's going to make up something that's not real and it's going to mislead people and they're going to be harmed. And I think the first thing to start with is that AI isn't a person, it's a tool. And so we as lawyers have to use that tool. We have to wield that tool. We have to sharpen the tool. And so what I've been doing is feeding particular AI models the relevant law. And it's up to me to keep up with the law so I can feed the tool or sharpen the tool appropriately. And so AI doesn't exist by itself. It's just there. It's like, it's a tool. It's a vehicle. So I think lawyers have to embrace it. And it's our job to make sure that it works properly.
So there's still a human component. We
Absolutely.
still need
Yeah.
lawyers to be able to ensure, because there
Mhm.
are all of those horror stories that we still see in the news where lawyers they wrote a brief and they didn't proofread it and they submitted to the
Yeah.
court and it has
Yeah.
all these citations.
Yeah.
So there's
And
still
one thing,
a role.
yeah, and one thing that these news stories don't cover is there have been bad lawyers forever. And
That is true.
now we just hear about it more because they're using these new tools, right?
Right.
It's like saying, um, because there's a faster car that's cheaply available, there's more speeding on the highway, right? There's always been people who violate the speeding rules. But now we just see it in this new vehicle, this new way, and it's newsworthy.
Right.
Another thing that like I've heard before is like you don't hear about the planes that land. You only hear about the planes that crash, right? Because it wouldn't be interesting. But all day long, these AI planes are landing perfectly fine, and they're doing great things for people to kind of liberate them from the drudgery professions like the law, where we're doing a lot of thunking and not thinking, right? We're doing
Yeah,
repetitive work over and over again.
that most lawyers don't want to be doing. We don't want to be doing the
Yeah,
rote.
it's misery.
Right. It is misery. Let's stay with the lawyers for a little while before we pivot back to how this might help unrepresented
Mhm.
individuals. So, given the negative news stories, are lawyers fearful of this AI technology, or are they embracing this AI technology?
A little bit of A and a little bit of B. I think there
Yeah.
are many, many people in the legal field who are afraid of AI. And I think that's because by nature, lawyers are risk averse and we are trained to think of reasons not to do something. We're trained to think of the worst case scenario, that edge case. And so we bring that kind of thinking to this as well. And that's problematic, right? In a sense, lawyers should never be in charge of a big transition of any kind. They shouldn't. They should be consulted about what might happen and we should plan with that information. But lawyers should never be put in charge of any kind of big change. And so many lawyers are terrified of this. And then there's more practical reasons too. It goes after one of the bedrocks of the legal profession, which is a billable hour.
Yeah.
That's the way law firms make money is they charge people by the hour. And recently I heard there are lawyers in New York City where I live who charge $4,000 an hour. Can you imagine paying $4,000 an hour? I mean, usually it's going to be a corporation that's
Right.
paying that hourly rate, but there's no way that's worth it, right? And so what AI is allowing people to do is to do what used to take 20 hours of legal work, it can do it in, 2 minutes. And
Right.
so how do you bill for that difference, right? Are you still going to bill $4,000 for the 2 minutes? Are you still going to bill it by the $4,000 hourly rate or even a $500 hourly rate, which
Right.
is standard?
And
It
even
can't.
for corporations are going to push back, right? They're going to say,
Yeah.
well, wait a
Mhm.
minute. If you could do this in just a few minutes with AI, why
Mhm.
are you billing me, even if they can afford it,
Mhm.
$4,000?
Yeah. And they're using their own AI models and they're hiring in-house counsel with AI and they're going to do their own legal work internally. And so that's another reason why the legal profession as a whole is kind of afraid of this. But on the other hand, even law schools are not yet fully embracing teaching about AI. They're still stuck teaching in the same old way. And I think that's a really huge disservice to law students who are going to enter a legal market that's totally different from the one that we had, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And they're not prepared.
What do you think? Because this is my other hat too, is I teach undergraduate law students who are, going to law school. A large percentage of them are, what should they be, what should we be teaching? What should law schools be teaching these students so that they do embrace this technology, um, and thrive?
Yeah. It should be teaching judgment. Like we should be teaching people judgment and ethics and humanity. One thing I recently heard is that AI knows more than we do, but we know better. We have that judgment that we can apply to this vast quantity of information that we now have access to. And so we should be teaching that to future lawyers. How do you determine the best path forward, the moral path forward, the ethical path forward, the more humane path forward, and balance all of those issues? Like AI can't do that. And so we need to learn how to do that. And unfortunately, we're not teaching people that. We're teaching people currently how to do the rote tasks that AI is going to be able to do very, very easily and very quickly. So we need to refocus on things like clinics, experiential learning, working with real people, working in person in courthouses and community centers and on the streets where the real problems are, and teaching new and future lawyers those types of skills. And that's really what we all think of lawyers anyway, right? In our imaginations, it's like lawyers are leaders, they are guides, they are people who translate complex things into common language for us so we can act and move on with our lives. That's what we should be teaching.
Right.
That's the way the whole industry should be working. And maybe this is our key to unlock that path.
And how to improve society. Your title with law
LawDroid,
is,
yeah.
future strategist, basically,
Yeah.
that, how should we be looking to the future and incorporating these? If you were going to give advice to law firms on, how to fully integrate AI and how to adopt it in ways to reduce the barriers, for legal professionals, basically fresh out, and maybe those who've been around for a few years, what advice would you give them in this space?
Yeah, I think right now we're trapped in thinking about making our existing work faster. So, Henry Ford was once asked, "What do you think people want?" And he said, "People don't know what they want. If you ask them, they'll say they want faster horses."
Right.
And so there's this great image of the first automobile being pulled by horses, right? So the engine makes them faster, which is kind of cruel to the horse, I think. But he said basically people can't even imagine the automobile itself. It's beyond their conception. And the legal industry right now is trapped in this viewpoint that we can make lawyers faster with these tools. And that's short sighted. I think what we should be doing is saying, let's focus on the clients. What do they want? They want answers, they want solutions, they want guidance. Well, how would they want to receive that guidance? How quickly and for how much money?
Right.
And how do we reach more people who need that kind of help? That's the way the legal industry should be thinking. And if we think that way, some problems shouldn't even be legal problems. They should just be information problems.
Right.
And we should be working on the hard cases, not the average cases. And
Right.
that means, we work differently. Maybe we work in different fields. Maybe we go deeper into the fields in which we already work. Maybe we move out of big cities where there are way too many lawyers and we move into rural areas or legal deserts where there
Right.
aren't lawyers for hundreds of miles, right? Maybe
Right.
people work in their own communities and become leaders and help change things for the better. So I think the legal industry has to kind of transform itself into this faster horses mentality and really think about like breaking down some of these broken structures that we're just, you know, um, perpetuating for no reason other than our own gain.
Right.
And that too, it's only the gain of the people at the top of the pyramid, right?
Right. Exactly. And that's, I guess we could pivot back to the 92% now who aren't
Uh,
at the top of the pyramid.
yeah.
Uh, how were those people um lives, how will their lives be improved by AI, and how does your work advance access to justice for them?
Yeah. So there's two things that I've worked on in the last year. And, I would start by saying I'm not a software engineer. I'm a regular lawyer. I went to law school because I'm bad at math and science.
Yeah, I
And
know.
so,
$4,000 an hour. It's like, I wonder what that is per minute. I'll have to look that up later.
yeah, exactly, exactly. We need to take our calculators.
Yes.
But, so I'm not someone who had a tech background. People might think when I talk about these things, oh, he just had a head start. No, I'm just like you. I'm just an ordinary lawyer. And I sometimes say, I don't even know how the internet works. I can't explain it to you. Right? It's a series of tubes, is all
Yeah.
I know. But still, these things that we have now are also easy to build. You don't need to be a coder. You just need to have an idea. And there's this whole field called vibe coding now, an agentic AI,
Hmm.
which means you just simply put in your idea into a search box and you get a product, a result within minutes. And so it's a really great vehicle to try out a lot of new ideas and pick the best one and move forward with it. And so in doing that kind of thing, I came up with two ideas that I had some friends help me build. One of them is a robot bot that helps tenants in New York City get answers about their repair problems. And it's called Roxanne AI. And it's live now. You can check it out, Google it. And what it does is it fills that gap because people who have conditions in their homes, they're suffering. They don't have heat. Right now it's 25 degrees in New York City. It's colder in other places. If you don't have heat, that could affect your health. It could be life threatening. If you're a kid and you don't have heat, you might develop other illnesses. You might not be able to go to school.
Right.
If you're elderly, it could really be, damaging to your overall health. And yet, if you go to court and you try to get a lawyer to help you with a case about heat, you're not going to get one because all the lawyers like me are focused on eviction cases, which are more threatening in
Right.
some ways. And so you're on your own. And if you try to find out how to get help or seek answers, you're going to be in Google land or in Reddit, just randomly, flailing about. You might
Right.
get good information. You might get bad information. You might get information about New Jersey and it doesn't apply to New York or Connecticut or California.
Yep.
And so this AI bot that I built is a RAG bot. So it's trained on information that I've given it and it spits out knowledge only based from that information rather than the entirety of the internet, which is how general AI models work.
Can you give an example of how, so say my heat is out.
Yeah.
How would I use it? How would I use Roxanne?
Yeah. So you would type as simply as that. My heat is out. What do I do?
Okay.
And Roxanne would give you 5 steps. Document the condition, contact your landlord, call the city, which is 311, to get inspectors to come and file a complaint, and then go to housing court. And this is where housing court is. And that's really specific information that directly answers your question, right? It's
And
context specific
and plain language.
in plain language.
And plain
Not
language.
only that, it could speak any language, right?
Oh,
So
really?
we can train, yeah. So Spanish, Chinese, Bengali, like whatever language we want it to speak, it can communicate. So maybe we operate Roxanne in Chinatown, right? And we want to set up a website for Chinese speaking people. Well, Roxanne speaks Chinese, right? Also, it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Unlike me, right? Doesn't need to sleep or take a break or eat. or go on vacation to recharge, right? It's always available and ready.
That's great.
And so things like that can be made in any subject, right? That's the power of this stuff.
Does it does it help draft the letter for the landlord?
It
Will it help?
can, but
Oh,
for now, so that's another tool that I've worked on,
okay.
which is through LawDroid, the company I work at now. It's called Depositron. And so many people have trouble when they move out of their apartments in
Yes.
getting their security deposits back. It's a huge problem.
Huge.
And I think it's $100 million problem just in New York City annually. $100 million of tenants' money is withheld by landlords for, invalid reasons.
Mhm.
And tenants have no real way to fight for that money. They can file a complaint that could take months. They could go to small claims court that could take years. And no one's going to help them navigate those processes. So what Depositron does is it helps tenants draft a letter in 3 minutes from their phone. And it allows you to upload photographs. Everyone knows how to take a photograph these days and attach it to an email or a text or put it up on Facebook or Instagram, right? We all know how to do that. Why not use that skill and say, here are photographs of my apartment on the day I moved out. As you can see, landlord, there's nothing wrong with it. I want my money back. And by the way, here's what the law says. And it's free. And so imagine if Depositron could help even a fraction of those people get their money back. And then it only gets more powerful from there, right? We get success stories. Landlords start to hear about it, or the evidence of the photos shows up in court cases and it's airtight. Landlords might change their behavior on this, and it gives tenants a new vehicle to kind of go after what's rightfully theirs.
Right.
And so just another simple idea that could help a lot of people at low cost.
Right. And that's the thing. If, even if someone could afford to hire a lawyer for
Mhm.
something like that, it doesn't make you'd end up spending more money on the lawyer
Exactly.
than you
Yeah.
would the deposit. So there
Yeah.
needs to be some alternatives to
Yes.
hiring a lawyer, which is your access to justice, giving people the power
Exactly.
to handle
Yeah.
their own issues.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, um, are you working on anything else?
Yeah. I mean, there's another. So one thing that we're working on next is to bring Depositron to other cities and states. Right now, it only lives in New York State.
Mm,
And we've had great interest in folks in Utah, in California, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania. And we've learned that, the security deposit problem is a problem everywhere. Anywhere there's a landlord and a tenant, the tenant's going to be paying a security deposit and they're going to have a hard time getting it back.
yeah.
We've also learned that it's a particular problem in college towns because college students move away and they're vulnerable to their landlords just keeping their money because they know that the student's not going to come back. They've gone on to graduate school or a job in a different city, or they move back home. And so I can't even imagine or quantify, this is a multi-billion-dollar problem in the United States for which there's no clear solution. So that we're really excited about. The next thing that we're building, and we've already built some examples of it, is chatbots for legal aid websites. So what happens right now is legal aid lawyers spend about 30 to 40% of every day on triage. So simply put, turning people away. Sorry, we can't help you. We don't do that. You're ineligible. You're at the wrong office. It's too late. And it's really miserable to have to do that. I can speak from personal experience, right? Even though I helped a lot of people, I probably turned away 10,000, 10 times more people than I've helped in my career. That's really sad. We shouldn't have to do that.
Right.
And so, is there a better way for people to get the information about their eligibility and the services offered and what they have to do to prepare for representation from a legal services office, other than waiting in line for hours and hours outside an office in the cold, waiting on a
Right.
hotline on hold for an hour or more, or traveling across town in a bus or a train, or spending money on transportation to go to a courthouse office and just languish there,
Right.
in the misery of a courthouse.
Right.
Um, and so these chatbots, again, just like Roxanne, give people direct information. Um, do you help me with this? This is my problem. What do I do? Can you help me? How do I make an appointment? What documents do I need? Where in the timeline of a problem like this am I, right? Is this the right time to seek help? Or should I wait? Are there other places that I should go to for help that are more directly going to help me than you are? And so imagine how much capacity that frees up for us to not have to do this. And again, it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, someone's up worried about a potential legal crisis that they're going to face. They can get an answer to it and rest easier and actually take steps to avoid maybe that what they might think as an inevitable crisis
Right.
can be avoided if they had the right information at the right time.
What kinds of issues do you see the bot being able to address?
Yeah, there's really simple ones like how do I file a small claims court case? Someone owes me money. I got cheated, um, and I feel helpless, and I can't afford a lawyer. Like, how do I do that?
Right.
Well, here's how you do it where you live. This is how long it takes. This is what you should prepare for. This is what to expect. Good luck, right? That's really helpful to people. Win
Yeah.
or lose, like you get some sense of agency, and ultimately you might reach that point of closure that is so important to move on, right? You had your day in court, or you did everything you could with all the information that you could get. Another really simple one is things like getting your driver's license reinstated. People find it very difficult to get their driver's license reinstated, which the licenses get suspended for all kinds of reasons. And people feel unable to undo those things. And then what happens is then you're stopped again and your license is expired and you're in trouble and you can't get
Right.
it back. Well, how do you undo something like that? What's the process? What forms do you have to fill out? It's very straightforward if you have the information. You don't need a lawyer, but most people end up needing a lawyer because the problem gets so much worse over time because they haven't been able to resolve it.
Right.
Or things like name changes or um, adoptions or custody issues or orders of protection, right? Things that put someone in immediate danger. They need an order of protection against an abusive spouse.
Right.
And it's too difficult to get that. And so they live in fear and danger. Well, what if you could make it much easier to file for an order of protection and help people understand how that works? People
And
be a lot
fast.
safer and
Right, and
faster.
faster.
Yeah,
Right, and faster. And these would
exactly.
be available through or on the website for legal aid. I mean, because one of the other concerns is that, I think we touched on this, the
Hmm.
accuracy of information.
Hmm.
People who Google information or get information from Reddit, as you said, it's not always accurate. How can we ensure that the AI information or the bot information is accurate and helpful?
Well, there's two ways this could go. One is lawyers and courts and law schools just bury their heads in the sand and let other people make this stuff. And if other people make this stuff, it could be anybody. People who are misinformed or deliberately trying to hurt people or profit from their technology and charging people. It's the Wild West. So that's like, option A.
Right.
Option B is we engage, we build this stuff. The courts build it, legal aid organizations build it, law schools build it, and we have our reputations, behind it and our experience. And so obviously I am a proponent of option B. That's what we should do
Yes.
because if we don't do it, it's not going to stop. Like AI is a freight train that's coming at us. And so other people are going to step into this space and they're going to be, some bad actors there. So we have to act. And that's the way we make sure that it works well is that we have our reputations. Like people already trust us to give good legal help, good legal information. And let's just do it in this new way, which is more effective.
Right. It actually probably would, in the long run, improve the perceptions that people have of the legal system, right? It would
Yes. Yeah.
increase the legitimacy of the system. There's such a high rate, and there always has been, quite frankly, of distrust
Hmm.
of lawyers, the legal system. And by providing this help and ensuring that it is useful, accurate, you will increase decrease distrust, and increase legitimacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future of our democracy is literally on the line here in this moment that we're in. And so many millions of people have no faith in government. They have
Right.
no faith in the courts, in our lawmakers, in our local elected officials. And that's why we have all these problems in many ways. It's like this lack of trust, this lack of faith. People have just um, kind of completely given up on our system.
Right.
And part of that is because they don't feel like they have a fair shot. And so, one way we can help restore that faith is giving people this type of help, this type of information, and say, yeah, these are your courts too. These are your laws too.
Right.
You too can access them and act on them
Yeah.
and use them for your
Yes.
benefit or your protection. Here's how, and that
Yeah.
could be a big deal for the future of American democracy, not to overstate it. But
No, I mean, it gives people agency. It's
Mhm,
empowering. Um,
exactly.
Now, on the opposite side, there are, people are highly critical of AI. It's ruining our environment. It's
Mhm.
taking over our jobs. What do you say about the downsides that are articulated about AI?
For sure, there are significant risks to the environment. Some people say that in 5 or more years, we may have rolling blackouts where the power grid will just have to shut down because the drain on the grid for these data centers that power AI is going to be so extreme
Mm.
because we're just going to be using more and more AI for all of the things that we normally do otherwise. And that's scary, right? Are we going to have enough energy to support these systems? And related to that is what are the environmental costs of more AI, more data centers, more electricity that's running through these machines to power them, more water that's required to cool these machines because they get so hot? What about that? And how do we deal with that? Well, I think what we do is we make rational decisions. We hold big tech accountable. We put limitations on how and where they site these data centers and how they power them. We push them to use alternate ways to power them, alternate sources of energy, and so on. But not just saying we're not going to use AI is not a solution to any of those problems, right?
Right.
It's not a binary choice. It's not like either we save the environment or we use AI, right? We can try for both. We can seek the benefits of AI and also push for accountability and regulation. And that's again where lawyers can step in, right? We have to be informed and educated and act on these laws and rules. That's where things like antitrust laws come in, is we have to make sure big tech doesn't get too powerful and too monolithic so that they can actually really harm us and in ways that we have no power over.
Right.
Um, and so that's what I would say. And then in terms of like the actual use of AI on a day-to-day level, there are many other things that we do right now that are much worse for the environment. Like we fly in airplanes all the time. We drive cars everywhere. We raise cows for meat. That's one of the worst things that there is for our environment. And yet
Yeah.
we do it, right? So let's be practical about like the hierarchy of damage that we're causing and act on all those things, right? Not find a straw man or, a scapegoat for the moment and say, no AI and I'm good. I've done my part. That's not really going to do anything, A. And B, um, there are other ways that are much more effective that
Right.
we can pursue.
Yeah, so you're not proposing anti-regulation. You're saying that this should be
Of
like these
course.
other
Yeah.
examples you just gave, it should be a regulated industry. I mean, because in the back of my mind, I was also thinking when you were talking, I did an interview with Diana Reyes, who was a former council person in New York,
Mhm.
and she talked about how they are trying to address some of the negative environmental consequences of even just electricity and what it's doing to some of the disadvantaged communities. And I was thinking, well, I hope AI isn't going to make that worse because putting this in just some neighborhoods to deleterious
Uh-huh.
effects is not the answer,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that's absolutely on us to make sure that It's not low income communities of color where they're citing data centers and depriving locals of their, natural resources. And also there's no jobs really in these data centers too. It's a real burden. And so we have to make sure that we have good policies in place in
Yeah.
all of these decisions surrounding AI. And that's where the governments have to step in, not abdicate responsibility, because big tech isn't going to stop their drive to push this
Right.
forward.
Right. And that's, I mean, one of your primary goals is to have greater equity, right? It's access to justice. It's not
Hmm.
trying to create greater inequity.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things we do on the podcast is we try to address misunderstandings or misconceptions, myths, particularly about people facing housing insecurity and homelessness. Is there a myth or misconception that the center that you work with, or even LawDroid, that is trying to address in these spaces with regard to AI and housing insecurity?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that like people have thought about that intersection. Maybe that's my job in the future
I didn't mean to
to
give you
think
another
like,
job. You already have a couple.
I know, that's right. But I enjoy all of them. So
Yes.
I'd happily take on another one like this. Yeah, I think, a misconception about this is that this is not going to change the underlying problems around housing insecurity. And there is some truth to that. I think one of the primary reasons that we have housing insecurity is we don't have enough housing. It's so
Right.
simple. And so, how is AI going to help us have more housing, right? There's no direct line between more tech and more housing, right? Like you might argue, well, it might make zoning a little easier. It might make construction faster. It might allow for, renderings and drawings to be done more quickly. It might allow for financing documents to be, written up more quickly. But those are all not direct, right? They're indirect ways. So I think that's a tough one, right? How do we keep our focus on that issue that we need more housing and we need affordable housing? We don't
Yeah.
need any more luxury housing. And we need it in places where there are trains and jobs and schools and, other things that support communities, not, far out in the middle of nowhere where there are islands of poverty. And that's a tough one. How do I reconcile, for one, this push for technology in this space with the underlying intractable issues that we've had for so many decades on this?
Yeah.
And again, I would say, like, I can do both. I can walk
Yeah.
and chew gum, right? Like, we can say, okay, let's continue to push for more affordable housing, more housing in general, changing zoning rules that restrict housing in areas where it's most needed, like, Park Slope in Brooklyn, for example, right? Or in parts of Manhattan. But also, let's help people right now who can't get help to solve basic problems, like they don't have heat or they can't pay the rent, right? Both of those things can be true and done at the same time. And maybe that's the, space that I live and work in.
Well, in the interview with Michael Santos and John Pollock, we talked about evictions, and it
Mhm.
sounds like this is an area where AI could help with reducing the high number of evictions, which does lead to homelessness.
Yeah. Hmm.
So giving people access to that information.
Yeah.
Um, as a final question, how do you think the law and AI will continue to evolve? Like what futuristic, put your future strategist
Futurist.
hat on. Yes, your futurist hat on. Where do you think this is going? And can you even imagine what the future might be 10 years from now?
Yeah. I mean, I imagine like the ideal future is one where all laws are available to everyone in any language, anytime they need access to them. And so, what do I do if, or this happened to me? What next? Or how do I file XYZ case? Um, what if you had access to all of that information? In other words, everyone could have the knowledge of any lawyer out there, right? Ultimately, I think AI is a knowledge delivery tool in the way that, like, the printing press was a knowledge delivery tool that revolutionized access to knowledge. And the internet was a knowledge delivery tool. And Google
Right.
was a knowledge delivery tool to people. Well, AI is not just a knowledge delivery vehicle. It's an interpreter, translator. It demystifies it. It allows you to understand it in different ways. So let's really see in the future a world in which we all have this knowledge, right? And are we better off? I hope so, right? There
Yeah.
shouldn't be winners and losers when it comes to rights and obligations and benefits, right? In a perfect world, everyone should have equal access to that stuff. And so that's where I come back to, like, do I need to exist in that future world? And if not, what would I do instead? What would all the legal aid lawyers do? Maybe we'd all be school teachers or painters or novelists or who knows what. But, you know, to me, that's the ideal world that is possible because of this information delivery technology like we've never seen before.
Yeah. It's a great equalizer, right?
Exactly.
Great
Yeah. Well
equalizer.
put.
Yeah. On that note, thank you so much for this conversation. I've learned so much. And thank everyone for joining us today on The Bells I Hear. Thank you for tuning into the Bells I Hear podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the Bells I Hear and follow us on social media. We post all of our conversations on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. You can connect with us on Instagram and post comments or questions that we can address on upcoming shows. More information can also be found on Blogger and Substack. So many ways to learn about the issues surrounding housing insecurity. Please join us and contribute to the conversation.